Man, I love that video. I don't know why. Something about getting an 8-bit version of yourself is always fun. Well, hey, it's good to have you guys back. My name is Ben. If you haven't seen the show before, I put the show together really because we get questions all the time about, okay, how do I create content that indexes well in GEO, and how do I start, and how do I track, and how do I audit? So if you missed the first couple episodes, they are back on our LinkedIn page and you can go back and check them out. The first one actually starts with how to establish that baseline of where you are right now, how you're ranking, and how you can check that out. The second conversation, which we did last week from Vegas, was how to actually create that content and some of the best practices for where to publish it, some of the things that are relevant to that actual content creation process. One of the questions that we got last week from our session was, okay, how do I actually determine which topics to create for? How do I determine what AI search wants to see more of? How do I build that? So wanted to showcase a few ways today how folks do that and how I do that, and then use some real world examples for how we can track that. Now, before we get too deep into the weeds, want to refresh. Whenever you think about AI search, the primary type of content that is looking for is what's called canonical content. So content that answers a very specific question, that is published in a very specific place, that helps source an answer for the audience or the person researching in a way that is designed to help answer a question and not necessarily always to drive a click, right? And when you think about canonical content, typically it's designed to be very, very specific in answering those questions, right? So if I'm somebody searching for a cybersecurity solution, I probably wouldn't actually create specifically a video called cybersecurity or answer a cybersecurity question. I might actually create a video addressing, how to prevent the exposure of locally stored patient data, right? If I'm in healthcare or something like that. So putting content out there that's very, very specific and answers very specific use cases and questions, right? Now, the challenge could become at that point, okay, well, we need to do 5 of these. Do we need to do 10 of these? Do we need to do 40 of these? Hey, look, that's why where MarketScale comes, and we help make that process easy to scale and create. But we want to stick on sort of the topic conversation today. Now, you probably are familiar with something like this, right? So if you've talked about topics in the past or talked about like search tracking, this is one place to start. So this is sort of the most familiar where a lot of people will start. And this is just Google Trends Report. So this is a little bit more of an old school way, and I'll show you some more new school ways and how to best prompt, LLMs and things like that to help source some of that as well. But wanted to kind of start here because this is a place where a lot of people are familiar. So let's say, for example, I am looking to specifically reach the market for, say I'm an LED wall manufacturer and I'm specifically trying to reach the healthcare market. I can actually go in and search, we'll just call it healthcare technology. Now, the challenge with something like Google Trends is it doesn't actually allow you to get crazy granular, right? It does a nice job of showcasing trends and searches and things like that. And you can see right here now it's saying only 100 people have searched for healthcare technology. Sometimes it can be a little wonky. But what's nice about it is it does kind of show you where people are searching for it, what regions are important. Also give you some similar questions that people are asking about. But the challenge with trends is that it's a little bit more difficult to get granular. Obviously, you do like to check things like trending now, right? Because there could be some industry conversations that are particularly relevant for you whenever you are um, creating that content, right? So let's say, for example, I'm trying to find a business example here. So let's search for business and finance. So say, well, here you go, man. This is all just here you go. We'll say Salesforce, right? So say I'm a CRM manufacturer and I want to see sort of what people are searching for when it comes to Salesforce. You see a lot here that it actually is more about kind of the employee status of some of these. It's less about actual use cases for CRM and technology. So it does give you a little bit of a baseline of kind of where to start. But I want to talk about a few places today where you can actually dig in a little bit deeper and come up with some ideas and best practices for topics to create. Now, the first place I actually recommend is just to go into a place like ChatGPT itself, right? There probably is no better place to start than actually one of these LLMs to see what their base says, what their library says. So let's say again, for the purposes of our conversation today, I'm an LED wall manufacturer looking to sell into the healthcare market. I might ask this: what topics are relevant for buyers of LED walls in healthcare facilities? And then here's just some best practices, right? Okay, how do I worry about uh, you know, waiting room entertainment? Do I need this for dashboarding or telehealth, things like that? And then obviously you can get into some of the specifics about brightness and contrast. So this gives you a nice place to start, but I want to go one level deeper. I might say, what are specific questions that buyers ask? I'll stay logged out here because I am using the incognito version of GPT, by the way, which is very, very important. So, one thing to think about as you're leveraging some of these different tools is that you don't actually want the biased representation of uh, the delivery or the prompts, right? So, if I'm logged into my Chat GPT account, it knows that I have a preference for certain topics or answers or thoughts, or maybe I have even researched specific questions before that will influence the output of what happens in GPT. So I typically will use GPT in this case in incognito mode, so it doesn't know my search history. It doesn't know what I've looked at before. It doesn't know some of the problems maybe that I faced before. This is a good way to establish that baseline as a marketer of kind of where you fit. So let's say, okay, is this suitable for clinical environments or only public areas? Or can it display real-time dashboard information? What is the pixel pitch? What is the recommended viewing distance? Which is a question you see a lot across industries for LED walls. So there's both the technology side, the use case side. This is one of the great questions right here, regulatory and compliance questions. Is it HIPAA compliant if patient information is displayed? Is there ADA visibility requirements, things like that? These are really, really great topics and questions that people are asking. So let's see this. ADA compliance is one of the questions that you'll get a lot of the time. So what I might say, I might pick one of these here, and you can do this with any single one of them or whatever. Say, I love this question. And then I might say, what are 5 specific and granular topics I can create content about related to this? And then GPT is going to give you some great questions and pictures about it. So, what are the viewing distance questions I need to ask for low vision, right? So, if I'm an optometrist, I'm going to be asking questions very specifically about this. But if I'm if I'm an end of life care facility or something like that, I may have different ADA compliance questions. I may have, uh, you know, all sorts of questions that I can ask right here. And this is a great way to source that. So take these. Normally, I'll use this, and then you can go in and send requests. Whether you're using MarketScale Studio, whether you've got an internal team capturing some of this, you can have folks create content with these topics. I do usually like to go one level deeper, and I might say, you know, which of these do you feel is underserved from a content standpoint online? And the reason I'm asking that is because as I want to create that canonical content, I want to create very specific questions, maybe that don't always have exact perfect answers, right? So if I'm asking what are underserved topics, okay, well, I may want to specifically talk about large format digital displays in hospitals. I may want to talk about LED walls. I may want to talk about large TVs. I may want to talk about all these things. I may also want to ask, how long can I expect this to work? Because this is going to be on 24 hours a day, what can I expect from a longevity standpoint with this technology? So this is going to give you fantastic granular answers that you can also ask questions to in specific topics that you can create for. Now, this is a fantastic starting point and a fantastic way to search that, right? And obviously, it's going to give you some great ideas. So the next step is, okay, we want to get a little bit more granular and we want to track that, right? We want to track how are we ranking there, but we also may want to see what are some of the questions that other people are asking. So if I'm in this is just what I use for AI visibility. So if I'm in MarketScale Studio and I want to create a bunch of this content, obviously you can do that here. But I'm going to jump into the AI visibility tool, which is the next way that I recommend that you kind of dig into some of these topics, right? This is a great place to see how it's ranking in GEO once I create some of that content. What other questions are people asking? Are there areas where I could even dig in a little bit deeper or more granular questions that I can answer? So I've gone ahead and I've built a prompt in here. So this is just a demo instance of the ecosystem. But I went ahead and I put a prompt in that was pretty generic. It just said, how long does an LED wall last? So what'll happen is I'm tracking this prompt. There are some responses, and it's tracking from each LLM platform. So you don't have to go in and manually do that yourself. It's tracking each response in each LLM platform here, right? So AI overviews in Google, Google AI mode, GPT, Gemini, Perplexity, things like that. And you can go in and see some of the responses here. Now, what happens as you start to track some of this is you can see over time how you start to perform. So, as I get more granular in this question, I might say, hey, when I'm thinking about LED wall life, what are some of the most resilient manufacturers, right? That's where you're going to start being able to rank a little bit higher on these, right? And you can see sort of that it's recommending not only LED sign fixture companies, CMS and content provider companies, things like that. It'll allow you to track through there. Now, as you build out those kind of prompts that you're tracking, this is probably my favorite feature in the AI visibility tool that I use is the content recommendations. So it gives me really a couple of different flavors. So if I want to prioritize AI visibility, it'll give me topic ideas, but it'll also give me some best practices on, hey, maybe you want to build a page that answers some of these on your website, an FAQ page. But let's say, for example, so if I'm AMD, we'll flip out of the LED wall world. A high priority recommendation that the platform recommends is virtualization CPU buying guides. So, hey, how can I create this? Or what are some of the questions that I have to answer here? And it'll rank a lot of those based off of priority. And this specifically is geared toward AI visibility. Now, the thing that I really love is that I can also swap to the social and UGC side of things, right? I can see how conversations are being had on Reddit or questions that people are asking on YouTube or content that's performing really well, right? So I might say, if people are searching AMD versus NVIDIA Intel, right, I can actually create content specifically to answer that question because it's a question you probably will get if you work at AMD all the time. And whether that's a subject matter expert answering, whether that's a piece of content you publish on forums or whatever, this is going to be a nice recommendation for you here. Now, one thing that I do want to spotlight as we're sort of talking about this, there really is no substitute, kind of lastly here, for just asking people, asking your sales team, asking your channel partners, asking your clients some of the problems that you've solved, or some of the questions that they hear regularly, or some of the things that they researched before they found you. That's going to be very difficult to replicate in an LLM, right? Because you can go in and you can search prompts, but actually hearing from the people who get to live it every day is a very, very important part of that conversation. So if I'm a marketer and I'm working with my sales team, I may hear something like this. Hey, Ben, my sales team says that, 3 or 4 times a day they get asked the difference between uh, this manufacturer and this manufacturer, or what's the difference between an LED wall and a mountain hung display. You can actually utilize those questions that you hear from your sales team to influence a lot of those topics as well, right? Because those are questions that people are already asking. And they're asking search engines, they're asking LLMs, they're asking their friends, they're asking their sales guys and gals as well. So those are great places to start as well. Now, obviously, when you kind of pick those topics, we talked about it last week, it's important to turn that into meaningful content, right? So we want to turn that into either a nice little UGC style video that helps answer that question, maybe even a blog post, maybe even forum posts, things like that. Typically, obviously, I will use MarketScale to source different subject matter experts because it's very easy for me, especially when I'm at trade shows like I was last week, to send out a direct request and have a subject matter expert in that topic record and respond versus me having to pretend like I'm a subject matter in all topics across the world, right? There is no better person to hear from than that person. So let's kind of take this from top to bottom. So let's say I've identified that the question that I want to answer, I'll pull up my screen here again just so you can kind of see it. I may pull up market scale here. In this case, this is just my workflow. So I've identified that I want to source an expert about ADA compliance in healthcare organizations. I may say, we'll just call this LED survey. And then I'll just kind of be straightforward. I want them to record a video answering this question. What are the largest concerns about ADA compliance when installing an LED wall in a health care facility? Or I could use some of those very, very specific topics that I found earlier, and I might say, you know, do you see specific requirements for LED walls in optometrist offices? So you can ask some very specific questions like that. Whether that you want them to record a video, maybe they can upload some content that they already have. Maybe even they can respond with text, right? You want to be able to source that easily. And at this point, what I do is I'll just either send that directly to their email from the platform here, or it'll generate a link. And maybe I've got a good relationship, or maybe I'm messaging with that person on LinkedIn. I can drop that link in there and then just have them respond. It's very easy for them to do that. And then obviously on the back end, I'll have our team edit, record, things like that. But when you think about sort of those topics and publishing that content once it's created, make sure that's on your website, right? Make sure that's on your YouTube. Make sure that's, you've got folks publishing that on your LinkedIn channels and your website and all these different places, right? Because that's where those search engines are going to pull from. So you've now identified that, hey, here are some of the challenges and questions that people ask for that are very specific in terms of, ADA compliance and LED walls. Well, let's publish that so the AI model is going to go in and source that. And then I'll also use on the back end too, I'll go ahead and build in a prompt in my AI visibility tool inside MarketScale after I've created that to sort of track that over time, right? Because what you'll see is that, wow, man, we're getting referenced more because people are asking these questions. Or, hey, you know what? People aren't asking this question as much as I thought they did, or they thought they would. Maybe I should tweak my answer or tweak the specific question or topic that I'm covering. So it'll give you good data and good feedback there. But the one thing really, really to focus on is, it's not really about creating more content necessarily, right? Typically, that's a nice byproduct of creating, very niche and granular content. but it's about creating content that's very specific and answers questions. So as you're building out some of these content plans, content strategies for trade shows, new verticals, product releases, things like that, it's important to get very, very granular and very specific and avoid sort of those larger kind of bloated conversations that are a little bit more generic, right? So when you're building that canonical content, it's very, very important, like I said, to do that research on those topics that are relevant, whether you use Google Trends, GPT, Gemini to do it kind of the hard way, MarketScale like I use. Highly recommend you do that, and then you take that next step of actually creating the content, which is what we covered last week. Obviously, we're going to be doing these every week, so going to help kind of answer very specific and granular questions that we get as well. So looking forward to continuing this series with you guys. And in the meantime, if you've got any questions, feel free to call, text, email, drop it in the LinkedIn comments. I will be doing these on a very regular basis every week to help answer those. So looking forward to seeing you guys again next week, and we'll chat soon. We'll see you.